So let's do a little work to prepare our eye for importing into Maya. Now we looked at how we are going to, into our skull scene. We looked at how we import an object into a scene from the last video, but when we import the eye model, it will bring everything in, including this image plane in the background and so on. So we want to get rid of all that. So we can just turn off the display layer reference button. We can delete the things we don't want, including this curve here that we used to make the eye. So if we select the eyeball itself and then hold down shift and then drag over the curve and the eye, it will deselect the curve, it'll deselect the eye and then select the curve. And then we can just delete. And you shouldn't have anything else in your scene. But the eyeball is this gray color, so maybe we'd like to put a new material on it. And I'm going to show you how to put an iris color that will sit on top of this corneal layer over to the limbus too. So you can just follow along with this. So again, to assign a new material, we're going to right click over the object, say assign new material, and this time we'll select a blend. Creates this new shiny object. We want to change the color to white. However, we'd also actually like to have specific color here over the cornea. So it looks a little bit more like an eye. So instead of just changing the color here, we're going to press on this little checkerboard at the end of the color slider. So if we click on that, a visor will come up, or a selection of options. And we want to select this one down here called the ramp. Now the ramp node should open. You can see, if you don't see this on your screen, press 6 on your keyboard, or 5 and then 6. And you can see the ramp going around the surface of the eye. Now it's going in the wrong direction if we look over in the attribute editor. And if you don't see this attribute editor, hit Control A on your keyboard and it should come up. We want to change it from a V ramp to a U ramp. Now you can see the red is at the cornea. It goes to a yellowish color, then green, and then blue. So we want this to be our iris color, or our pupil in iris. So we can maybe bring in the green a little bit. And let's change that to sort of a dark brown color. Go to this. Oh, I changed the wrong one. I want to change, no, the green. Yeah, I'll change the green to sort of a dark brown. So it's in the red, orange, yellow region. Reduce the color. Doesn't really matter what color it is, honestly. We also want to change the interpolation from linear to exponential down. And then change the red color to black. We can just slide the slider right over. And we'll go to black. Actually, maybe exponential down is not the best option. Let's try none. Okay. That's better. So we can pull the brown down here. So we closes off. We just get a small pupil. And we can grab the blue, drag it all the way here. And we want the border between the blue and the brown to be at around the limbus, or where the globe of the eye merges into the extra partial sphere of the cornea. Of course, blue is not really the right color, so we can just click on the blue and choose white. So this isn't meant to really look like an eye. It'll just give us a little bit of the detail we need to help place things like the eyelids stuff a little better. So we can pull it to something like that. You can see there's a little white dot in the middle of the pupil. If we click in the ramp here, you can see I can move these colors around by grabbing the little circle that represents the color. If we click on the X over there, it deletes that selected color. But here I can change this to black and see if that solves our little problem. It makes a little bit of black on the back of the eye, but it also puts black right in the middle. That's just because it's wrapping the color around. We're not getting a really good representation of it on screen. Anyway, so that's good. Maybe that white should come forward just a tiny bit. Something like that. Now you can see there's a big specular highlight on this object. This isn't essential to do, but if you want to reduce that, we're in the ramp node here. If we click on this little box that has an arrow going to the right, that means follow the connection of this ramp back into that blend that we created. We can call it eye shader. Maya won't allow you to use spaces, that's why I use underscores everywhere. And then just under specular color here, we can make it white, but then you can just turn down this eccentricity amount and even move the specular roll off, just so we get a tighter little highlight there. Anyway, so that's better. So now we've got the eye in a good state. So we want to make sure this thing is named. I never named this. Go back to the channel box. I'll call it eyeball. And I'll delete its history. Now I've talked about deleting history before, but under the edit menu, we can go to delete by type history, and it just gets rid of all the construction history involved with this object. And I'm going to save this file. Oh, I have to save it in the right spot. This is an older eye model than I used before. So I'm going to save it here and overwrite this one. Okay. So now I want to open up my skull scene. So we can go to File, Project, Set. And mine is in my Dropbox, I think. Oh no, it's on my desktop. So we want to choose that folder and now open the skull. I've already saved that. So you can see in the bottom left, it's reading the file. Now, I already put eyes in here, so I'm just going to delete those. And again, I'll show you how to import the eye. So File, Import, choose the eye model, and it should bring it into the middle of the world. I hit 6 on my keyboard, it goes into texture mode, and I can actually see the eye, the colors on the eye. Now you can see that it's oriented in the wrong direction. So I can rotate this 90 degrees in Y. Yours might be different than mine, but you'll probably have to rotate it around the Y axis. So you can type some value in there. Might be a negative 90, might be some other value. And again, I want to place this using my front and side views. So in terms of placing the eye, there are tools in Maya that we can use to measure distances and establish the exact, or try and establish the exact center of the orbit here. However, it's a little bit tricky to explain how to do that, and to get the exact measurements that we need might be a little beyond what we need to do at this point. So what I'm suggesting that you do is find what looks to be the center of the eye. So the pupil is roughly in the center. And then, like we learned in the class before, we want to just bring it up a little bit and over laterally. So it goes up about 3% superiorly and 5% laterally percentages of the overall diameter, the height and width of the eye. So something like this should be fine. Now, in terms of how far it should protrude, if we look at it here in the, well, in this case, the front view, but it's the side view of the skull, we have to know how far back in the orbit to go. Obviously, that's too far. how far forward. And remember, we want to take a tangent from the most anterior part of the superior orbital border and the most anterior part of the inferior orbital border. And that tangent should pass somewhere between the limbus, or where the iris starts, and the forward edge of the cornea. So to do that, I think the easiest way to approach this is to take one of these objects we already have, and if you've used all of your tissue depth markers at this point, you can just select one and we want to duplicate it. So I'll take one from down here. So to duplicate it, is just select it, hit Shift D, and then you can drag out a new one. And let's just name this thing our measure. And let's sort of drag it into position. And we want to place the base of it just at the inferior orbital border. Obviously it's too far out here, but push it in. We want to look at this edge here. Well, we can put it right in the middle. We want to look at this line here that's going right up the middle of the cylinder. Let's look at it in this view. So this is probably a pretty good position. So we don't want to go too far over toward the nose. So I think it would be somewhere like this. And we want to extend this out. So again, R, if we go into scale mode, scale it in Y. You can see it's passing through the eye. And it goes up here. Now we want to tilt this forward. So this middle edge, if we look at it through the side view, is going just through the cornea. E for rotate, and I just want to rotate it along the dark blue line. So what I'm looking at up here is how it intersects with the orbital margin. I just want this middle line to touch the orbital margin, so something like that. And I want to look at it in this view. See if that's good. This could maybe be tilted over this way a little bit. Makes it a little bit trickier, but it's going to be something like that. So this middle line, the one we're looking at, we want it to go somewhere through. We don't want it just brushing the edge of the cornea, and we don't want it as far back as the limbus. So the eye, I think, probably has to come back a tiny bit here. If I just move this away briefly. Yeah, so that looks like it's probably pretty good. So you can see it's not intersecting right with the eye here, but projecting through it is fine because when we look at it through the side view, we get the orthographic view. And I was trying to place it on the anterior point of the superior orbital wall, although maybe it shouldn't be tilted that way. It might be better. Yeah, maybe even a little tilted more medially that way. I'm just going to select this light blue line because we're sort of off the path, but so if that would come up like that, actually we maybe bring our eye forward a little bit. So ultimately we want this top part to go, this middle line of the cylinder to go through the most anterior portion of the superior orbital border and start on the most anterior part of the inferior orbital border and pass somewhere through this area between the limbus and the cornea, the tip of the cornea. So that's pretty good. So it's going to vary from skull to skull. I'm working on the skull that you're working on, so you'll probably get something similar to this. And then you would have to do the same thing over here on this side. I will leave that to you though, but in order to use this eye again, we want to duplicate it. Again, Shift D, and then just move it over. And we can get it roughly in this position here, but we may want to look at this orbit on its own, which might be slightly differently shaped than the other orbit. Rough it into position. Do the same thing from the side view of this one. Now this one's on the other side, so it's difficult to see. Well, it's impossible to see. So again, with this navigation cube, we can click on this arrow till we get to the back side here. And then we can see the eye. We can do the same thing with one of those cylinders to put it into place. And when you're done with that, what you'd probably want to do is select both of these eyes, and in the display layer area over here, click on this icon to the far right, which has a little plane with a sphere and something else beside it. That'll create a new layer with those two objects on it, and we should call this something like eyes. Put it into reference mode, so we can turn them on and off, and we can not accidentally select them. I've got something in the middle of its head there. Oh, never mind that. So again, 4 for wireframe, 5 for shaded, 6 for textured. There we go. So after this, you'd want to put on all the tissue depth markers, or you can do this as the last stage. It doesn't really matter. You may also want to, although I didn't do this for you, select all these tissue depth markers, even if they're on the skull already, because they're the only thing you should be able to select in the scene. Create a new layer and put these on their own display layer, TDMs. Save. So you can turn those on and off too if you don't want to see them. Okay, great.